Welcome back to another episode of the Capes and Tights podcast right here at capesandtights.com. I'm your host, Justin Soderberg. This episode 96, we are joined by Cullen Bunn, comic book writer. He has written multiple comic books at multiple different publishers, including Marvel and DC, and more recently, Boom, Dark Horse, Oni Press, Aftershock, Vault, Source Point. The list goes on and on and on. I just definitely left some people off. We talked about some of those publishers in comics right here on this episode, but Cullen Bunn is a writer of multiple different comic books on the shelves right now. Two of my favorite comic books of 2023 so far are Legacy of Violence and Nightwalkers, are both from Cullen Bunn and his creative team. So check out this episode. But before you do, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, as well as find us on Apple, Spotify, and all our major podcasting platforms. 5-star reviews are welcome. Subscribe, rate, review all the time. Thank you guys so much for listening. This is Cullen Bunn, comic book writer of two of my favorite comic books of the year, A Legacy of Violence and Nightwalkers, as well as two new comic books coming out, Lamentation, as well as Ghostlore. Enjoy, everyone. Welcome to the podcast, Cullen. How are you?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's sunny but cold here in Maine. I don't know where you are, but it's cold here in Maine.
We went from winter to summer, it feels like today. So
that's good, I guess, right? Yeah, that's one of those. Yeah. I was talking to my wife yesterday. I was like, it looks nice out. Like, it looks like I want to go outside and sit outside, but it's definitely not worth the temperature out there right now.
It has to be a very specific window of temperature for me. And it's past that on one side or the other always.
Well, welcome to the podcast. We're big fans of your work. You've been doing it for a little bit of time now. I'd say long time because it makes you sound old, but just a little bit of time. And we're pretty happy to have you on. So welcome.
I'm happy to be here.
So I guess we can go back a little bit here and just let anybody who doesn't know, how did you get into enjoying the art of comic books in general?
I grew up in what I consider like the golden age of being able to read comics, because they were, first of all, they were in every convenience store. They were in every grocery store. I didn't really have comic shops until I was a little older, but yeah, 7-Eleven was my comic shop, and Fast Fare was my comic shop, and every grocery store we went into, or drugstore. And the other thing that was my comic shop were garage sales. My parents loved to go to garage sales, and you could just go and just buy comics by the dozen for pennies. And my dad, it would be nothing for my dad to come back from some trip with just a box of comic books, random issues that he would, give me. So that was really my introduction to reading. It was, and that's from a very young age. So I've loved comics for a long time.
We love hearing people's stories and how they got into comics. I love how you mentioned like random comic books, and a number of people have told me that too, like random issues here and there. Funny as I'm 37 years old, but like as an adult, I can't like just jump into a random comic book. I have to make sure I got to read the issues 1 through whatever and all this other stuff. But at a young age, we're like, whatever we can get our hands on, we're just going to read and understand what the heck's going on.
Oh yeah, no, it's you'd read an issue of some book and it would leave on some terrible cliffhanger, and it was, in all likelihood, I wouldn't read the continuation of that story for months or years. It would all depend on if I happened to find that issue somewhere. So it was interesting. It was interesting reading. It's interesting how those cliffhangers will drive you crazy now, but back then I didn't care. I just was happy to read the book. And then I was super excited when finally, after months, I'd go to a Stuckey's and buy one of those 3-packs of comics, and in the middle was the second part of the book I'd read months and months earlier. So
it's the medium in general anyways, going back and read. They need to go back and read that original issue over again and then read the new issue and stuff like that. It's the great thing about the medium of comic books too, is the fact that you can do that, is go back and reread over and over and over again and enjoy it a different way every time too, even as a young kid. Excuse me. So you obviously collected comic books, read comic books growing up and stuff like that. Then you transitioned to actually into writing and creating comic books. You've written for the big two, DC, Marvel, and so on and so forth. But now you're doing a lot more independent and self creator owned stuff.
Yeah.
What is that like going from eventually? I had a conversation with someone earlier today about making it to the big leagues, like getting to DC and Marvel, and then it seems like people get to that pinnacle point in comic books, but then they go off and they do their own creator owned or independent. I feel like that's the more trajectory of people nowadays. Like you accomplished it and then you can go on and do what you want elsewhere. What's that been like going from working at the big two, then going to independent and creator owned stuff?
I think it's difficult for some creators to actually have a little bit of trouble with it. And, for aspiring creators, there's no right or wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Some people want to work on big two comics and that's what they want to do. And some people want to do independent stuff, their own stories, and that's what they want to do. And that's fine in both ways is a-okay. And some people want to do both. I started in independent books.
Mm-hmm.
That's how DC got, DC found out about me and offered me jobs, and that's how Marvel found out about me and started offering me jobs. So, I've always had a foot in the independent world. Even when I was writing as exclusive for Marvel, I carved out several independent slots in my contract so that I could always be working on that. And I love these characters that I've been reading forever. So I love Marvel characters. I love DC characters. From a experience of writing, for me, there is no comparison between writing my own thing and writing a Marvel or a DC character. While I love those characters and I love playing in those universes, those books don't come easy. And there's just so much more. There's joy in those books, but there's so much more joy for me in independent books. And I was just at a convention a couple of weeks ago, and another creator had the exact opposite opinion of me. He said, I like working on creator owned stuff, but the joy for me is working on these characters that I love. And when he said it, I was like, what are you talking about? And I said, you know what? Who am I? Who am I to judge what he gets joy out of? So it's just the way what I like, and that's what he likes. And I think there's it's that for everybody. For me though, on a personal level, doing the creator owned stuff is a little more fulfilling than the big two, working on licensed properties. Although I still do it. I still do it. And I only want to do it. I only do it, when I started out, I do it for whatever. I don't care what you offered me. You could offer me a Pound Puppies comic, and I'd have written the best Pound Puppies comic I could have. But nowadays, I only want to do those if it's a character I really love, or a character I think I can, and even more so, a character I think I can do something interesting with and actually contribute to, rather than just taking whatever someone throws my way.
Well, you've built yourself into a career that has the ability. I mean, you have enough other work to do that this is more like, oh, this is cool. They're going to offer me X, Y, and Z character. I can't wait to write that character. Or I'll just focus on my creator own stuff. Like it doesn't like you don't have to it's not forcing yourself into that whole where when you were exclusive with Marvel, you kind of had to do what they wanted you to do.
Well, you could still turn down projects for Marvel, but at the time I was doing my exclusive books for Marvel, it was one of those things where I was like, 13-year-old Cullen would never imagine writing these books. Why it wouldn't, and could definitely not imagine turning down one of these books. Mm-hmm. So, I'm going to do whatever comes my way.
It's funny. I talked to someone earlier this week about turning something down, whether or not you like it or not. I feel like I'd be like, if someone gave me the opportunity, and that's maybe why some people stay at these IP places, is that you get the opportunity and you're just like, okay, I got the opportunity. I finally did it, and I'm going to stay here. Or they just like it. I was mentioning to someone else, you can't write Superman anywhere else or Aquaman anywhere else. You have to write it at DC. So it's like, if you're going to want to write those characters, you kind of have to be in that house, and that's where it is. If you want to write your own creation, then obviously you can do that elsewhere. But yeah, if you have to, if you want to write Spider-Man and draw Spider-Man, you kind of have to be at Marvel.
Right. And make no mistake, if the potential had been there at Marvel for me to continue to write Magneto or Uncanny X-Men or X-Men Blue, I would still be writing those books. I would never. I mean, that was not a book I would say, okay, I'm done. I would always be writing those books. The same with Sinestro at DC. I would have written Sinestro for hundreds of issues had I been given the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, I think Chip Zdarsky said that about Daredevil and about Batman. They were talking about like, I will stop when they tell me to stop. I will continue doing this until they tell me to stop.
Yeah, for
I mean,
absolutely.
if you find the characters you like and you write them, and that's obviously you write what you like, meaning that if you like the characters, obviously you're going to come up with the most creative stories and best work. If you don't like the characters, it's going to be more of a struggle, which is going to show in your writing most likely.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's always a struggle. Even if you love a character, coming up with great stories for characters that have been around for decades and decades is not is not it's not simple. It's no easy task.
It isn't, but as of right now, I just have a list of books that you're either currently working on or just came out or about to come out. So you are a pretty busy person in the world of creator-owned comic books and independent comic books. And I personally think that two of those books so far, because I haven't been able to read Ghostlore, I just read Lamentation. I
Oh, yeah.
just read that first issue of that. Oni Press sent that over. But Legacy of Violence and Nightwalkers are actually in the running for some of my top comic books of the year. And so I'm really excited to talk to you about that because I'm glad Mad Cave just sent over the advanced PDF of the Legacy of Violence trade, which is coming out on Wednesday, April 5th. And then I was just able to catch up on Nightwalkers a couple nights ago. Not only is one of the best comic books I think of the year, but this cover over here, I don't know if you can see it, the Nightwalkers cover.
Is that the one with the hole getting blown through the
Yes,
creature's body? Yeah.
that might be one of my favorite covers so far this year.
Yeah, that cover's awesome. Actually, all the covers for
Yes.
Nightwalkers have been something special. And that's, big shout out to Joe Picardo because I was not super familiar with Joe's work when I started working on Nightwalkers with him. And now I'm like, Joe, we gotta, let's keep this train going. And no matter what's going on, I want to make sure we always have a project in the pipes together. So yeah, that cover is great. He's a very talented artist and is just he has such an interesting visual style, I think. That's not my favorite of the Nightwalkers covers, although I like it. There's another one he did that's an hourglass, and there are shapes in the hourglass filled with blood, and there's shapes in it. And that's my favorite of them, only because of how it ties to the issue. But yeah, all the covers have been really
phenomenal.
Really awesome.
And obviously we were I hadn't heard of Joe's work really that much either. And then I was like, that name sounds so familiar. And we had a guest on here, Jonathan Hedrick, who wrote the recount over at Scout Comics. Mm-hmm. And his fourth issue in that series, the artist couldn't do. And so he had hired Joe Picardo to do it. And I was like, that name sounded so familiar. I don't know where it got it from. And I was like flipping through comic books the other night. And I'm like, oh, that's where it was. It was the fourth issue of a series.
Joe's really, really great and fun to work with. And, we're going to, our plan is obviously to continue Nightwalkers, but we're already cooking up another project. And he's such a creative force. I texted him. I was on the floor of a convention and I was like, hey, Joe, here's a quick idea for a new book. What do you think of this? And he texted me, he said, I love this. And I texted him a few descriptions of characters. And within an hour or two, here's like a whole turnaround of the entire cast. And here's here's a potential cover and all the stuff. So he's in it. And it's exciting to work with someone who's that excited to do comics.
And so, yeah, that the Nightwalkers is over at Source Point, and then you have, I mentioned, the Legacy of Violence, which is over at Mad Cave. Mad Cave is one of my favorite publishers in recent times. Great books coming out of there, and this is one of them. And so Legacy, let's chat a little bit. We're on the Nightwalker stream. Let's talk Nightwalkers a little bit more. So obviously, Colin Johnson also killed it on the coloring in there too, which is that mostly dark colors, and then the pops of red look amazing in there. You mentioned the covers the covers are beautiful and so on. And also Justin Birch, who's been on the podcast before too, excellent at lettering on the book, to your whole creative team on that book is amazing. How did this book end up at SourcePoint? You're with a bunch of different publishers, but how did this one end up at SourcePoint?
So Nightwalkers has a really interesting origin in general. I'm part of a small production company called Hustle and Heart. And, we are out there, trying to sell TV shows and movies, and we're pitching to producers all the time and talking to different directors and actors and screenwriters. We're always out there pitching. And my partner, Heath Amodio, and I, Hustle and Heart came together because we both love comics. And we just started talking about the idea of doing comics together. And we partnered with some other people, and one of them brought us a short story. And they said, "Hey, do you like this short story?" And it's a vampire apocalypse story. I think it was 3 or 4 pages long. And I said, "Well, here's what I would do with a vampire apocalypse story." And I kind of spewed out in a really messy email the overview of Nightwalkers. And they loved it. They wanted to do it as one of these first projects for what we're calling this new endeavor we're calling Overlook Productions. And we're doing these projects under this umbrella, and we've been talking to a number of publishers about doing these projects together. The big thing that we have to maintain with those books, though, is we have to maintain creative control over the media rights. And that's not always the case with every publisher you work with. Some want to take the media rights, some want to control the media rights, some want a piece of the media rights. And because of what we're doing with Overlook, we can't do that. Mm-hmm. And SourcePoint was one of the first that stepped up and said, "Look, we want to make great comics. If the book gets picked up and turned into a TV series or a movie, that benefits the book as well." It's, they stepped up to be supportive of what we were trying to do with Overlook. And yeah, so it came about talking to the crew at Hustle and Heart and Overlook Productions, talk about something that, it would be dumb for me to say we're not trying to make books that are adaptable in other formats. My number one goal is to make a great comic, something that's fun to read no matter what. But we absolutely are actively shopping Nightwalkers as another format.
Well, I mean, in this world we live in right now, where things are adapted so much too, it's like you don't want to lose sight of the fact that we as comic book readers love a great comic book. But in the same sense, me who can't get enough of stuff like that, and the people like myself, that if I really enjoy a book like Nightwalkers and then it becomes something on TV or film, it's just gonna make me even happier. And then there's a possibility out of that, you're like, okay, let's do volume 2 of Nightwalkers right, as a comic book, and then a TV show kind of thing. So
well, yeah. It's a weird balance, because mm-hmm. You can go too far one way or the other. You can think, I'm only in it to make a TV show or a movie. Mm-hmm. And you can tell those comics when you see them. I think you can tell the ones that are concept without a lot of execution. And they're obvious. I'm not bashing the people that do that. No. Hey, if it works for you, do it. But with Nightwalkers, we wanted something that works as a comic. And we do have, I have big plans for the Nightwalkers, universe. It's a 5-issue initial series. But the plan's already in place for volume 2 and volume 3, and there's a much, much bigger story to be told there.
Making one reader over here pretty happy on that too. So it's funny because I'm a big Walking Dead fan. I've been since I used to read the comic books a lot, and then the TV show and so on and so forth. So the zombie apocalypse got to me, but also the horror. This is a way more, I say violent horror, but gruesome and brutality of it is a little bit more in that realm. I mean, it's a mature comic book. It brings it almost to another level, but also is a little bit more, I don't know, it's different. And that's what I love about it. I love it. It's in the same realm, but it's a different story. And that's what I really loved about it. And then again, the visuals on it, if somehow those visuals from Joe Picardo can get over to a television show or a movie and translate well, it's even going to be even more killer for me.
Yeah, no, and look, the comparisons to Walking Dead are going to be there because it is an apocalypse with monsters. Okay, mm-hmm. It's going to happen. But I wanted to make sure it was different enough. These monsters are faster. There's the key difference in the monsters, mm-hmm. right? is that these monsters they are not shambling. They are fast and mean, and that's just one, one form of the Nightwalkers.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they're they're almost like worker bees in a way. But so they're fast, and the most important thing is the characters. I'm trying to give these characters some interest. Our lead character is a recovering addict, which is an interesting comparison when you're dealing with addiction and this vampiric addiction to blood,
Mm-hmm.
and her sort of disconnection from the world around her. And I don't know where you are in Nightwalkers. I think you're probably 3 or 4, but
A three,
but
yeah,
there's
yeah,
obviously there's a trajectory I think you
yeah.
can see for her. She's
Mm-hmm.
she's got a bigger role to play in the world, and for a character who's a burnout and not really and feels like there is nothing left for her in the world, that's an interesting place to be.
And it's also deeper than a lot of these other. Just there's a simple. You could easily have made a vampiric post-apocalyptic comic book with nothing else but that being the whole sole plot is that, and people are just trying to survive. But it's starting in a recent sort of rehab facility, and someone going to hopefully be able to redeem themselves as well, potentially. That also just adds a whole nother level to the story, which is great.
Right. Well, I appreciate it. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Like I said, I just did back-to-back conventions, and it was really nice to see people who were coming up with both of the books that you just mentioned,
Mm.
and are enjoying them. Because that's always the fear for me is every one of the what if people just don't like this?
Yes.
What if people are just tired of me?
Oh, Colin's making another comic book.
Yeah.
No.
What if people are just done with my nonsense?
Well, I mean, you mentioned both of them. A Legacy of Violence. First of all, the name alone pulled me in. I'm like, okay, what the hell is this? The cover art is insane. Is that iconic, some sort of iconic character on the cover that just makes you go, okay, is this something I want to know about this person or this being on the front cover with the skull mask and all that stuff? And then the artwork itself is it's a way to portray brutality, gruesomeness, blood, and killing, but not over like it doesn't gross you out because the whole thing is kind of like I hate to say the word messy, but
It's very
gritty.
nice. Yeah. No, yeah.
I
That's
mean,
fair.
so like it's like because the whole thing is like that, it's not like you'd see someone. I don't know if you've seen like Terrifier or things like that on the
Right.
movies. That's like in your face, blood splattering everywhere. But because of the way that the artwork is done in it, it's done in a way that the whole thing is kind of um like I said, messy but
Yeah.
gritty. It allows it to be like, okay, I can see that there's blood and guts and things like that, but it's not overwhelming. It's
I,
weird. I don't know. It's
I
hard to
always
explain.
I always feel like Andrea Muti is
Yes.
the artist. I always feel like Andrea is like painting a portrait, really, with every book he does. It's almost like if I could just line everything up in one long panel. It's almost like he's painting something. And I just love that style of and Andrea is the same way. I'll do books with him until he, like all these readers we were talking about, is tired of my nonsense. I'll do books with him.
And it has like motion in it, you just feel it. There, like I said, I don't know the colors palettes on similar. Both of them are they're minimal. If that makes any
Yeah.
sense, like there's not a lot going on, but it on purpose, and I like that a lot too about it.
Yeah.
I'm reading for a book club. We're reading House of M for the
Okay.
book club, and it's funny because like someone opened it up and started flipping through it, someone who's been into a bunch of independent comics recently and looks at it and go, yeah, that's big two art. Like that's what you see out of these bigger two publishers is that style of artwork, which is great. It's beautiful and it's well done. But there's something about going into the independent world nowadays that people could do whatever they want in the
Yeah.
inside of a pages of a comic book, and it stands out to me that's like, this is what I want. I want this. Almost feels authentic, and that's what
Yeah.
I love about the inside of this. And Andrea did a great job on Legacy of Violence for
Oh yeah.
sure.
And that book for me, that's a weird one for me because that's the book that I'm working on. I don't know if people are going to like it or not. I'm just like, it's a very different book for me in a lot of ways. There's a couple of books I'm working on that are very different, but A Legacy of Violence is the big. It's a horror book, and I do a
Mhm.
lot of horror books. But the big difference with A Legacy of Violence is it's not a supernatural story. There's no supernatural elements. Um, so then I have to rely on the truth and the way the
Mhm.
world works. I don't have any magical mumbo jumbo to get me out of trouble if I do something as a writer that is a stumbling block. So it's really, I mean, it is a slasher comic, and I've
Hmm.
written slasher comics before, but this one is really a dark, grim slasher book. With its origins are, where it comes from is a dark place, and Andre, I knew it was going to be pretty. I just didn't know if I'd pull it off as a story. I think once it wraps up, and that's the other thing. It's a long series.
Hmm.
It's a 12 issue series. So there's not a lot of places to hide in a book like in a series
Yeah.
like that of that length. I can't hide. So I gotta I had to really do. I had to put some effort in that to make it stand out, make it different, and hopefully make it something people are gonna like. Um, and
Well, I feel
yeah,
like if you like horror slasher movies, this is another medium to take this in because yeah, one of my favorite comic books styles of current times is make a comic book that's based in real life that has one small or one slight change that makes it supernatural or unbelievable, i.e., Nightwalkers with vampire, you know what I
yeah,
mean, zombies. That kind of thing, and that makes it so okay. We're living in a real world where this person is in a rehab facility and bad things are happening, but there's this crazy creature in A Legacy of Violence. I was like waiting for that almost because that's how a lot of these independent comic books are written nowadays. But like,
yeah.
I was almost glad it wasn't because it was like, oh, this is just like reading a comic book that's a slasher film, which is amazing. It's
Yeah.
just, it was one of those, if you like that industry or that category of films, this would be in there because it's you could be real. You could be
It
basically
could,
someone could have told you this as a story at a bar somewhere,
right.
and you would have been like, I'm gonna make this into a comic
it,
book.
it could be real. And what's really disturbing about it is the things that are the closest to sort of being surreal and supernatural. When we really get into things like this concept of Unit 761 and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that, that's real.
Mm-hmm.
That existed in our world, and it's terrifying. And I actually had to veer away from the truth of that a little bit because I was like, oh, this is it. It got a little too real for me when I was doing research on the book, and I was like, okay, I maybe we'll do it's a highly fictionalized version of this because some of it's a little too disturbing even for me probably.
Well, and it's funny. Someone we read a different book recently at the book club, and it was the recount we read from Scout Comics,
Mhm.
and it's a political thriller, and they were like reading it, and like I try to read comic books to escape the world that I live in, and so when I'm reading something that could potentially happen or could have and that book came out in November of 2020, so it's like
Yeah,
was right in the middle of all the crap that we dealt with.
yeah,
And it's like, I don't know what it says about me that I'm like, okay, Legacy of Violence is amazing. I really like it. My escapism isn't really escapism.
right. Well, that's what comics are for, man, and
Yes.
that's what that to me, everybody asks, what do you hope to accomplish with this book? And for me, the first thing, no matter what else I want to do with a book, the first thing is I want people to enjoy it
Mm-hmm.
and to be able to escape with their comics and whatever. So I'm glad to hear that.
Yes, and like I said, I've been very happy with a bunch of the stuff that's come out from Mad Cave too. So when I saw this as part of their lineup, I had Mark London on the podcast actually to talk about a bunch of random things, and
Sure.
and just very happy with the way that the book came out, and it's beautiful, and I'm excited. April 5th as it comes out in trade, so I'll be able to grab
Yeah,
that too. Even though I have
I haven't looked
four
at
issues,
I
so.
haven't seen the trade yet in physical form. I actually think a box just arrived that has them, so I have to go cut that open and look at the trades.
It's also that's another beautiful cover. And then if anybody really likes more covers and more things, they had a bunch of cool Mad Cave exclusive covers of that book on their website, on Mad Cave Studios' website. But you also have coming out was it said Lamentation? Lamentation?
Lamentation from Oni. Yeah.
Lamentation from Oni Press. And so I was able to glance at that one a little bit a couple nights ago, read it over. I want to read it a couple more times, but that's you with was it Hillary Jenkins and Simon Boland,
Well, those are
artists?
those those
The
are
artist?
the no, not the artist.
It says it on
The
Previews World artist.
It
That's pretty
does.
funny.
Uh-oh.
Haha. I see it
That's
here. Rising Star Aronia.
Yeah, there you go. There we go.
Yes.
Yeah. I say, look, this gonna be bad because I may pronounce his name wrong. Arjuna Sasina is how I pronounce his
Okay,
name.
that could make
And
sense. I can see that.
I've never
Who's
spoken voice to voice with Arjuna, so I'm not 1,000% sure that I think Hillary colored it.
That's okay. It might be
Yeah,
true. They
yeah,
don't.
yeah. Hillary
Previous
Cullen.
world.
Yeah.
It's previous
Well,
world.
until the book hits the stands, I was gonna say I was gonna try to call it up here on my screen, and so I could look at the entire cast because they probably sent me the same thing they sent you.
Yeah.
So I
Let's
could,
see here. I have it. I have it in my PDF here of it. It's Lamentation right
let's
here.
look
Yeah.
together and
Yeah. There you
learn.
go.
Let's look together.
Written by Cullen Bunn. Are you surprised about that? That's good, right?
That well, finally they got that right.
Arjuna Susina, and then
Yep.
colored by Hillary Jenkins too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there we go.
That's weird, but it's so funny how
And then
it
Simon, who you mentioned earlier, is
yeah,
the letterer on the book.
okay. That's
Simon's lettered a bunch of my books. So
that's pretty funny how they put it. Not funny, but like it's sad how they put it in there as Cullen Bunn, and then it says Hillary Jenkins and Simon Bowman as the artists. And
yeah, I
not
mean
even,
it's yeah, it's unfortunate for
yeah,
Arjuna put a lot of work into that, so it's unfortunate to see. But that'll get changed as the book gets closer to
yeah.
coming out. It'll pop up and be correct.
It's funny
Um,
though. I only say that because the first sentence says, "From the mind's eye, master storyteller Cullen Bunn and rising star."
okay, well,
So
yeah, well, there you go. At
it's just
least we
kind of
got that
funny.
right.
It's obviously just someone inputting something in the back end. It's nothing, it is what it is.
Right.
But this book, I mean, just so people, I mean, obviously, so Legacy of Violence is out on stands in single issue format now. It comes out on Wednesday, April 5th in trade. And then Nightwalkers is also available in single issues at your local comic book shop. But Lamentation comes out in, was it May
Yes,
3rd? And so
that sounds
what's
right.
your elevator pitch for your new book?
So Lamentation is the story of a young actress who has just she's responding to an ad for a production of a play, and she goes into the theater to audition, and immediately she's hired on the spot without an audition, which is weird enough. And then she finds out she can't leave the theater until the play is performed for their audience, and then the theater seems to be haunted and by these strange mysterious forces. There are murderers waiting in the wings. It's a little bit it's a fusion of cosmic horror and giallo, and it's just got a lot of different different kinds of horror in its DNA. And it's fun because the story's sort of playing out on two fronts. It's the story of this actress who's trying to find her way out of this. All she wants to do is go home, but it's also the story of the play that's being rehearsed until the night of until opening curtain. So it's a very surreal, mind bender of a horror story about these two surreal worlds colliding.
Yeah, it's a again another visually amazing book as well. So I guess the question I had, and I meant to ask earlier about when we were talking about artists and Joe Picardo and things like that, is in now moving into this one with Arjuna, how does this partnership, how do you find you have books at multiple different publishers and multiple different books at the same time? How do you connect with these artists, and how is it like working with finding the right fit for each book, or how does that work?
It's different for every project.
Okay.
And I can even, like the three we just talked about,
Mm.
with Nightwalkers, I put a pitch together without an artist attached. And then my partner Heath kind of went out and found a bunch of artists, and he sent me, pages and pages of artwork and portfolios from different artists, and we picked a few we really liked. And Joe just kind of rose to the top as that's the one I wanted, was the right look for this book.
Mm.
And that's how that one came about. With A Legacy of Violence, I put the pitch together and was actually writing it, and the publisher was searching for artists, and they came back and said, are you familiar with Andrea Muti, who I've worked with on other projects? And I was like, yes, absolutely, that's our guy, let's go. That's the one to work with. And then with Lamentation, that was Arjuna and I were talking, because I've known him for a while. We're talking about doing a book together, and I sent him the pitch and said, hey, what do you think of this concept? He liked it, and we took that to Oni as a project together. So sometimes with creator-owned stuff, it can be I'm bringing the artist, or it can be the publishers finding the artist. It can be either one. With like a Marvel or a DC book, almost every time the publisher is going to assign that artist, and that's who you're going to work with. Sometimes you get a little feedback back and forth, but almost always the publisher says, this is the artist we want you to work with. At least in my experience. There's some other folks I'm sure who have been able to, they bring their own artist to the table, but most of the time it's the publisher bringing the artist.
But I guess it shouldn't be surprising because you're trying to make the best comic book possible, not just write the best comic book possible, but also the most visually attractive comic book. Is that, like I mentioned, Legacy of Violence worked so well with Andrea's artwork. Nightwalkers with Joe's artwork, I think it just does that well. And then Lamentation does the same thing here. I think that it's like one of those things that just fits what you're trying to tell for a story. And again, it shouldn't be a surprise, but I'm just saying, like, it's one of those things that I hate to say you're lucky, but it's been lucky enough that say that Cullen and these people joining together and making these great comic books. It's just awesome.
It is a comedy of riches, the artists I've been able to work with over the years, because I've been very lucky. I just feel like I've worked with so many very talented people, and some of them I've gone on and I work with again and again and again if I can. And you're right. It is lucky. I mean, it's I consider myself very fortunate. I don't typically write scripts with the artist in mind. So, people have asked me that, do you write a script differently for Brian Hurt, for instance, who's an artist I've worked with over and over and over again, than you do with Tyler Crook, who's another artist I've worked over and over again, or Joe Picardo, who I've only worked with on, a little, to a smaller degree.
Yeah.
And my scripts look the same for each of them. It is, though, once you get to know an artist and start working with them, of course, I write the things that I think Andrea is going to, sometimes I write things and I think to myself, oh, this is going to be awesome when Andrea draws it. It's going to be amazing. Or this is something I know Brian's going to love to draw. Technically with Brian, this is something I know Brian's going to hate drawing, so I'm going to send it his way. Have
See what
fun.
he does.
Yeah. Have fun, Brian. I mean, he just called me last week. We're working on a new book and he said, I hate you so much because you knew I was going to hate drawing that. And I was like, yep, I sure did.
And he's gonna do it anyway, and he's gonna do it great.
That's just it. He's gonna hate it, but it's gonna look amazing. So
yes, stop drawing it so well, and he won't make him do it.
Yeah, that would be the trick. Just do it terribly, and you'll never be asked to do it again.
Isn't that the thing we learned as kids? Like, don't load the dishwasher correctly, because if not, your mom's gonna make you do it over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta mess up in order to not have to get all that work thrown on you.
And so, Lamentations, is it 3 issues? Or is
it's
it more
3 issues, but they're really, they are like meaty issues. They're double-sized issues, each one.
It was a reason for that format, just to try to tell the whole story, and it made sense. It didn't drag on or anything like that. It definitely fit in that, whatever number. Is it 44 pages?
Yeah, it's something like that. I can't remember exactly. Lamentation's interesting because it's been in the works for a little while. And when it was first accepted, my pitches are always written as a number of issues. That's how I pitch. I was like, this is what happens in issue 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. But initially, I only wanted to do it as a trade, original graphic novel. Mm-hmm. So I just wrote the whole thing. It's just this long, script. But then in recent months, they came back and said, hey, we might want to do this as single issues. And how can we break that up? So I took the script and I looked at it and said, well, there are natural breaks throughout the script, but none of them are at the 22-page mark anymore because I expanded it out. But there were natural breaks at 3 points, so that was why we decided to go with the 3-issue format. I think it'll be, it gives you 3 more months that the book's on the shelf and has a cover, and it's got, those variant covers that they've shown so far are pretty awesome. And it's gonna, and then it'll be collected as a trade.
It kind of makes me, as a person who collects single issues too, it's like it's a mixture of the happy medium. I'm not having to wait for 10 issues. I'm getting a nice meaty 44-page issue, which is a double issue once, and then another. I get 3 of those, but I still get the ability to collect single issues.
Yeah.
And so that's a nice little. It's different. I like that. It it seems when someone looks at a $6.99 cover price, you're like, oh my god, but then you realize it's actually
With the
cheaper
book that thick, yeah.
because it's
Yeah,
350 because if there's 22 pages of a book, that's two books in one, and it's 350 a book, so it's actually cheaper than
yeah.
if you were to pay $3.99 for a book. So it is kind of weird for some people to look at that, but yeah.
Yeah, and look, I like the idea of trying different things with the format in general. I mean, it doesn't always have to be the standard 22-page book. I
Mhm.
like trying a few different things, and I like that Oni's willing to do some interesting things that way.
And so like issue 1 drops May 3rd, which is obviously should be an FOC here in a couple of weeks. And then June 7th is issue 2, and then it'll be July, I'm guessing, for issue 3. And then you said that's all written. Is it all done? It just has
Oh,
to be
it's all,
dusted.
yeah,
Yeah.
the whole thing's done, lettered. It's in the can, as they would say. It's been finished for not a long time, but at least a few months.
I'm excited to read more and stuff like that. Oni's excited, I tell you that much. They're at least their marketing people have sent me emails like, "How do you like it?" Da, da, da. So they're excited for it too, which is awesome. They really want to hear what people's feedback on it is, and
That's
we'll actually have something up. This episode will come out on Wednesday, April 5th, and then this will be out. There'll be already be a review or a discussion on our website for it as well, too. So check that out there. But the other book you're working on is over at Boom, which is Ghostlore. That one's coming out
Ghostlore.
soon too. What's up with that one? Can you tell me a little bit about that one?
Yeah, so with Boom, over the past few years, I've done a couple of 12-issue maxi series, is I
Mm-hmm.
guess what you'd call them. So I've done a couple. I did one called Bone Parish, and I did one called Basilisk. And I like that format. I like doing that 12-issue series. And Boom likes it. So I started coming up, they asked me what I would follow Basilisk with. Ghostlore is a completely, I mean, it's a different kind of book, and it's been a challenge to write, but a lot of fun. Ghostlore is about a father and daughter who, after an accident, find they have the ability to see ghosts. And these ghosts want to tell them stories. They're almost desperate. They're hungry to tell stories. And they come, they'll run up at them, and they're, let me tell you, I have to tell you, I have to tell you. And they tell their story. And when they tell their story, they cement into our world. And some of the ghosts, once they've cemented into our world, can be set free. Well, all of them can be set free. But what we find is that the father and the daughter can both set these ghosts free. They can put them at peace, but they have very different ways of doing it. The daughter's way is peaceful and easy and simple, and the father's way is violent and it's hardcore violence and action. And that kind of they've already have a wedge between them, and it drives them further apart. But what we also find is that while they have this ability to see spirits, there are other people in the world who also have this ability, and some of them have very, very sinister goals that they're using these ghosts rather than setting them free. And then the other interesting part of Ghostlore is these ghosts want to tell a story, and we see one of those stories every issue, and it is all drawn. Every issue there's a story that this ghost tells that is drawn by a different different artistic team. And they're just 5-page stories in every issue, so it's got a little bit of an anthology vibe to it. It's
Okay.
got a little bit of, but then there's also this epic supernatural adventure that we're going on in the middle of it all.
But
So
the main artist is the main artist in that. Is that Leo Max?
yeah, the main artist is Leo Max, and he's awesome.
Oh, it's
um
unbelievable. Yeah. I was just
yeah.
saying, I was like, I love Basketball of Heads.
Oh yeah, Basketball Heads is so great. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the main artist is Leo Max, and then every issue though, there's a
Yeah.
different artist who's going to come in. Like in the first issue, Brian Hurt and Bill Crabtree draw that first story, and then another one is Danny Luckert, who draws the story, who I've worked with many times. Naomi Frank, who did some Tales from Harrow County with me. So to some degree, I'm working with different artists that I've worked with, and I get to experience working with all of them again.
And that's maxi series are great too. I think it's a
Yeah.
perfect. There's something about that. Again, it's three. It's just a nice number of volume issues, and it's not too long, but it's not too short. And then again, like the anthology part of it's pretty cool because I'm a big anthology fan. So that makes it seem like an anthology. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it all came from me asking myself the question, what ghost stories would ghosts tell? And that's and it's this idea that the world, while a legacy of violence, there's no supernatural. This world is completely swings, the pendulum swings the other way. The world is messed up, and there's a lot of supernatural goings on, if these ghosts are to be believed. I mean, who knows if they're telling the truth?
You're trying to balance out your comic book writing. Is like, okay, well, I'm gonna go completely supernatural on this one and not in this one. That balances my world out right there.
Correct.
So that's, I mean, it's exciting. And so do you just shop these specific stories around to different places? Do you have some people's in mind? Because obviously, like I said, you did the Door to Door Night by Night. It's out too on Vault. You did the one shot Foulness on the Walls. Obviously, Legacy of Violence, Nightwalkers, Red Zones over at AWA. Obviously, you mentioned Basilisk. And then you have Ghostlore coming out, Lamentation coming out. You're also doing Archie comics. Is it Chilling Adventures presents Cult of the Wiccan Boy?
Cult of the Wilkin Boy. That's just a one shot.
Yeah.
So it's just like with everything, it just all depends. With Ghostlore, Boom came to me and said, "Hey, we want to do another series. What do you have in mind?" And Ghostlore is what I pitched them. Now, if they had not accepted Ghostlore, if they had said, "Nah, it's not right for us," I would have taken it somewhere else, probably. And that's usually the case. If someone would say, "We don't like it and I love it," I'm going to take it somewhere. I'm going to try to shop that book around. With Vault, they came to me and said, after I did Last Book You'll Ever Read, they said, "Okay, what's next?" And I pitched them two ideas, and they liked both of them. But Ghostlore's or Door to Door Night by Night's the one we decided to go with first. So it just depends. I don't know that I ever sit down to say, this is a book I'm writing because this is an Oni book or this is a Dark Horse book. I usually will start coming up with the pitches and stuff. And once I have a pitch, I might say to myself, I think I have a better shot at selling this to Dark Horse or Vault or whoever based on editorial preferences and things like that. But I don't necessarily write it up with, that in mind from the get-go.
It gives you a little bit of freedom because there's different publishers have different expectations and different wants and needs and things like that too. It also helps with that aspect of it. And honestly, if people want a piece of Cullen Bunn, all these different publishers have a little piece of you. Use you.
I mean, I guess I'm trying to think of a specific example and I can't right off the top of my head, but I guess there could be situations where the publisher says, "Hey, we really want this kind of horror story," and then yes, okay, I might try to put something together for them in my in particular. But even saying that now, I can't think of a time where I had to do where that's something I did.
I mean, it sounds like, funny thing is, it sounds like Ghostlore is a Boom book, even though.
Yeah, I think it was right. Yeah, I think it was right for them when I and that one's close, I guess, because they said, "Hey, we want something to follow Bone Parish and Basilisk," and so I specifically sat down to try to come up with something that would be a good companion piece to those books, but would be very different.
And I said, it does make sense that over there in the maxi series, whatever that they call it, there, the 12 issues, is also
who
makes
knows
sense.
What that's called now.
How many pitches, stories do you have going on in your head at one time, or on your computer, or on a board, or whatever? How many do you think you have processing right now?
I can tell you. I'm going to look to the right, and I can tell you exactly. I'm not going to pan my camera over.
Yeah, obviously, yeah.
So on my board, I have it divided up by, here are the projects I'm working on, here that pay money, here are the projects I'm working on that don't pay money. And, here are the projects that we're doing something with media outside of comics. And then here are the projects that I'm developing or pitching. There are 11 currently on the developing and pitching board. Now, that doesn't mean some of those may never happen. Some of them may happen years down the line, but those are the ones that I'm kind of that are more than just a few lines written in in a notebook. if you blow it out to how many concepts I'm thinking of all the time and having them, there's hundreds. But these 11 are the ones that kind of have some meat on the bones.
That's
But
awesome. It's just you can't stop. Like, the second you stop coming up with ideas, the
oh yeah,
second
well
you stop making
that's what
comics, that's not a good
yeah,
thing, right?
that would scare me. And of those 11, when I look at them, a couple of them I'm actually pitching, some of them
Okay.
I'm not pitching, some of them aren't ready to be pitched yet, but they're just being developed.
But I mean, you are not, lazy. I tell you that much. You're out there getting stuff done, and your name is on every week. I feel like it's a new Cullen Bunn, not new, but new issue coming out on the racks of the local comic book shop, which is great.
It, yeah, I'm trying. It's funny. You just rattled off some dates. You're like, oh, this book comes out there.
Yeah.
And honestly, I've never concerned myself with
Yeah.
it until the last few weeks. And I just opened a document. I have a document that has all the release dates because what I'm trying to do is avoid more than one on a
Yeah.
week if I can. I can't always, but I'm trying to now. And it only helps me and the publishers for me to be more sort of aware of those things. It's one more piece of busy work I have to do, but it's nice to see where the
Yes.
things fall on the calendar.
Well, I mean, like, so Book of Shadows at Valiant, is that you did Book of Shadows?
Yes,
And
yes.
that's four issues. It wrapped up in February, but you have a trade coming out in the summer, and then you got Door to Door, Night by Night, which number 5 hits this month, in
Yes.
April. A trade coming out this summer, the first trade of that one.
Yeah.
Foul Us of the Walls came out in February, which is a great. I love that. It's a magazine, oversized magazine style format, which is great. That one shock from them. A Legacy of Violence, number 5, comes out in May, and the trade comes out in April. So you
Yeah,
do have and then you get Nightwalkers with number 4 hitting. I wrote number 4 of 5 hits May 9, or sorry, April 19th. Red Zone number 2 comes out in a couple of weeks. Basilisk trade paperback just hit in March, the number volume 3. And then
yeah.
new series you got going on. I'm gonna forget some stuff here, but Ghostlore over at Boom, number 1 hits in May 10th. Lamentation, May 3rd. Chilling Adventures presents Cult of That Wiccan Boy, one shot hits in May 9th or April 19th. Shock Shop trade hits 412, and
Man, you keep
all
it. You're better at this than I am.
and
I didn't even know when Shock Shop released in trade. Now I got to write that down.
the biggest one of them all is All My Little Demons or Omnibus over Aftershock May 17th, right? How big is that thing?
Oh, it's a massive book. I mean, it's I mean, it's like a cinder block. It's pretty impressive.
Those things come and they like I bet the by LCS and he's opening up the omnibus things and it's like I'm like, geez, you have to hold that thing when you're reading it.
So you're getting these off of previews then?
A little bit of previews, a little bit of when the trades are being released. I think Amazon usually has a pre-order date on them.
I gotcha. Yeah. No, that's great. Some of that's me asking for education purposes because
Yeah.
I'm like, now I need to put I have to add Shock Shop to my list because I
Yeah, I
forgot
think
to
where did I
ask
find that out?
coming out.
That
Yeah.
did
So
say May 16th is Shock. Okay, Shock Shop. It says May 16th on
hey,
pre-order on, but it's also possible like they do it sometimes for trades and things like that. Where like
yeah.
don't they release it sometimes at LCSs
Bookstores,
before?
yeah. Bookstores and local comic shops are different. So
Yeah,
it's a I don't know how anybody keeps it straight, to be honest. It's a nightmare.
it's possible that the Shock Shop one I got off of Previews World as well. So and they
So
change. All these things change. It's like okay, next week we're going to release it one more week. It's the comic book industry is like that. It's like you think it's coming out, and then it's like nope, next week. Sorry.
so the only other one that I know we haven't talked about, and you may not even, I don't know, it depends on if you saw the news that just got announced a couple of days ago, is in August, I am returning to Marvel and writing the 5-issue Death of the Venomverse series. It's going to be a weekly series in August about look, the multiverse of Venoms, and Carnage has decided he's going to kill every one of them, and that's my first Marvel project in quite a while.
Are you just liking to kill Marvel characters? Is that how it is?
Is that is not look? I'll admit they came to me and said, "Hey, would you like to do another Venomverse series?" Because I wrote Venomverse and I wrote Venomize, and I said, "Yeah." And I knew what their plan, some of their bigger plans with Carnage. I said, "Yeah, let's do that." But I only want to do it if I can call it Death of the Venomverse and I can live up to the title. So, so I guess I have a murderous streak in me. and,
I'm just
and
laughing at that. Like, yeah,
I'm going to
it's a
indulge
thing.
it.
But I do have. I mean, you got your Battle Scars back there that wrote part of, and then you got As Guardians of the Galaxy. You didn't kill anybody in Marvel, did you? In that one, did you?
In As Guardians of the Galaxy, I
I don't
did
think
kill
so.
some people in As Guardians of the
Okay.
Galaxy,
See,
but they had been brought back from the dead. It was a whole thing. They had
no
to,
one stays dead in the
yeah.
Marvel
Well, in
universe.
mine, they don't stay alive. That's
Yeah, and then Shock Shop trade paperback, according to Dark Horse's website, is April 12th, 2023. So that is
right.
coming out here pretty soon,
Awesome.
which is exciting because that's a great book too
Well,
over
thank
at
you.
Dark Horse. But yeah, so like you're a busy man. First of all, how do you do it? Where do you find time? Do you not sleep?
I don't sleep a whole lot, but honestly, if I can write 5 pages a day, is all it takes, and that's not 5 pages a day. The real work for me comes in on the outlining phase,
Okay.
planning what's going to happen on the page and in the issue itself. Once I've got an outline, writing 5 pages a day is nothing. Um, but I have to do that every day,
Mm-hmm.
7 days a week. And if I don't write 5 pages today, I've got to write 10 tomorrow. And if I don't write 10 tomorrow, I've got to write, 15 the next day. So I have to stay on top of that, or it gets real messy. But for the most part, if I can do just 5 a day, I can stay on top of everything. I like to do more than that if I can, but
Mm-hmm.
but I know what I have to do to stay on top of everything.
I mean, in a sense of how a day works, I mean, if you were able to write, okay, I'm on a roll, let's write 7 or 8 pages. Would you just do 5 pages again tomorrow, get yourself ahead, or would you do
Oh,
three
I would
tomorrow?
I would just keep writing tomorrow. I wouldn't give
Okay.
myself a free day just
Hmm.
because I did well. Um, I mean, I might if I'm working on some prose stuff, some novels and stuff like
Okay.
that. I might maybe I'd spend that day working on that instead. But I'm always going to be writing something and trying to move something forward. And and it's just I don't feel good if I'm not doing that. If I'm not actually doing the work, I get very antsy and very uncomfortable.
I my wife and I talked. I was like, the pandemic has made my anxiety level just like through the roof to the point. And then I have a 2 year old, I had a kid 2 years ago, and that didn't help and all that stuff. And she's like, you feel the most calm when your head's in your laptop. And
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, it's because I'm in another world. I'm like writing something about something fake thing that happened. And I'm just like, that's what is going on right now. I'm like, me reviewing or talking about someone's fake comic book is calming me down because I'm not dealing with other shit that's going on in the world.
Yeah, and look, you gotta, people need to get through however they need to get through. I used to believe that writer's block. People would say, "Oh, I have writer's block," and I was like, come on, you don't have writer's block. You just don't feel like working.
Yeah.
Um, and how dare I is what I say now. How dare I say that to anybody? If you have writer's block, you have writer's block. You get through it. How you get through
Get
it,
through it.
I'll offer some suggestions, but I'm not going to tell you it doesn't exist anymore, because I know I felt it during the pandemic, and I felt my motivations change. Everybody needs to work the way they want to work, and maybe, just maybe, I don't know. This is a suggestion I have. Maybe we should all stop being so damn judgmental about how other people work or don't work, myself included. So that's what I think.
I mean, I would tell you right now, I've talked to multiple people saying I have the benefit of being able to curate this podcast to invite people on that I am excited to talk to and I like their work. I'm not told by some upper person to be like, well, you got to have Cullen Bunn on because he's got a new book coming out. And
Nobody
I'm like,
says
well,
that anyway.
what was up? But like, I was like, well, if in my mind, I'm like, well, Cullen books suck. I don't want to like talk to him or anything like that. Like, that would not be fun for me. You know what I mean? So like
Right.
the easiness of that aspect of is like I wanted you and invited you on the podcast because I enjoy your work. And if you were writing this many books and you're still doing it good well, then you should continue doing it. If I were to tell if I like we sign off here and I'm like, well, actually, Colin, this book sucks, so you should really stop.
Well, listen, they're not all going to be winners. I'm
No.
not. Somebody at one of the shows I was at recently was like, "Man, I like this book, and I like this book, and I like this book, but I just really didn't like this one." I was like, "That's okay. They're not necessarily all supposed to be for you. Some people do like that book. Some people don't. And sometimes there's a clunker in the mix. I know that. I try not to. That's my I've been very focused on trying to not have any clunkers in the mix, but sometimes you drop the ball. Sometimes the thing I think is really going to work out doesn't work the way I wanted.
What, Cullen? You're not perfect. Come on, like
I'm not.
seriously.
I'm not.
But I
Try.
mean, it's a fun. I liked seeing it when I've gone from. There's people out there who are like, I'm an X-Men fan, and they want to read everything that's X-Men related, and they just like they're in that, or they're Superman or
Sure.
whatever. And then there's people out there who like horror comic books, and like obviously you fall into that category with a lot of your books that are horror comic books. But then I've gone to the point where now I've been lucky enough to be like, I'm a Cullen Bunn fan, or I'm a so and so fan, or I'm a so and so fan, and that's the benefit of having a number of books out on the shelf at a time. Is each week or each every other week or every couple of weeks a new Cullen Bunn book comes out. I know I'm gonna be excited for that, even though we know this, you know, that whatever,
Yeah.
if someone comes with the book once a month, I have to wait every month for something. So it's kind of cool in that sense. I would think it's similar to if you like shows that come out on Fox, that every night there might be a new show for you, but they're all different shows. And so I enjoy that sense of it too, of having so many things for me to choose from. And I'm excited
Yeah.
because some of them I'm gonna go read back and reread, like
Yeah. I
Nightwalkers.
like to think of it, we think about, novel series that we love. And sometimes the frustration comes that the novel never, book, whatever, never comes out or takes forever and you're waiting. If you're a fan of my work, you shouldn't have to wait too long for something, and that's, when the day comes and I'm not working on as many books as I'm working on, I'm going to be very nervous and very uncomfortable.
Well, hopefully it's because you're shifting your ear because you're adapting something for TV or for movies or something
Maybe,
like
but
that. So
I like the thing I
yeah.
love about comics is it's such a compared to like a novel or a
Mm-hmm.
TV show or a movie. Comics give me sort of an immediate gratification. I
Mm-hmm.
write a script, I send it to the artist, and the artist starts giving me pages. So I'm seeing emails every day. I get pages of art based on my story, and that's kind of hard to beat from
Mm-hmm.
an excitement level for me is seeing these pages coming to life.
And you have amazing artists that you've been attached to too, so that
Yeah.
doesn't hurt it at all. But I mentioned you had at least 760 different books available right now. So if anybody's a Cullen Bunn fan, go out there and buy it. And you have some of them available on your website, right? I believe there's
Yeah,
some things available on your website.
yeah, there's some things available on the website. We just kind of redid the store, and I've got someone managing that for me now because I just can't stay on top of it the way I wanted to. And there's going to be, I mean, we have books on there. We have variant covers. We have covers you can only get from me. Uh, Really, my website's sort of the doorway to everything. So
Mm-hmm.
it's just cullenbunn.com. I do, it has access to my weekly newsletter where you're going to see everything I'm working on and all the things that are distracting me from my work. It's you can get to all my social media, everything like that, all from cullenbunn.com.
Which is easy and great and wonderful because sometimes it's hard to find information about people, especially when you have so much going on. It's
Yeah.
nice to have it at least curated somewhere and stuff like that on there, which is nice for that sense too. But you obviously, like you mentioned, you have a Patreon too.
I do have a Patreon
Yeah.
where I put chapters of novels and scripts, and sometimes I post comics that are coming out. You'll get patrons will see the comic before it ever hits the stand. And that's all Patreon/Cullen Bunn. So
Patreon's a great way to connect with anybody out there who doesn't know. A great way to connect with your favorite creators too. I'm a Patreon subscriber to multiple different people, and it's just one of those things you get having the ability to see things ahead of time, or potentially depending on what level you're on different people's like, oh, there's special covers only for you, or
oh
special
yeah.
issues only for you, or PDFs or whatever. It's really a cool way in this world that we're able to, via the internet, be able for you to connect with your fans
Yeah,
closer than ever, probably.
it's a lot of fun, and you get to really get feedback on stuff, and you get to, like you said, you get to see things. I mean, I post concept art for comics that are 2 years down the line, and I can't tell you the title, but look at
Yeah.
this art this artist has done and things like that. It's it's exciting for me just to get that feedback and have people talk about it and enjoy it.
That's awesome. And you went to a con recently. I saw were you at the Source Point table?
Yeah. So that was at Fan Expo Cleveland, and I
Okay.
set up at the Source Point table. Yeah.
And then, so are you going to any other conventions anytime soon, or this year in 2023, or are you mostly writing?
No, well, I'm not going to a lot. I'm doing some
Yeah.
smaller shows, sort of local shows, for various reasons, just doing that. The next biggest show I'm going to is Heroes Con in
Okay.
Charlotte, which
Mm-hmm.
is a great show if you're a comic fan. It's a very comic focused
Mm-hmm.
convention. If you haven't gone, you should try to make a trip. It's worth it. So that's the next big one I'm doing. I think that's in July.
That's awesome. It's one of those things. It takes so much. It's so nice for us to for readers to meet the creators, but it's also one of those things that it just takes a lot of time out of your day and energy out of your
Oh,
weekend and time to just go out and just sit there at the table all weekend.
they are exhausting.
Uh-huh.
It is they are they can be a little brutal
Yeah.
in terms of there's a physical toll that people
Yeah.
don't expect from. I mean, I think, well, I guess people do. Everybody knows you go to
Yeah.
a convention for 4 days, whether you're a fan, whether you're setting up, you're going to be tired when it's all over.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so we love seeing all the creators at the conventions, but you have to understand that they can't go to every single one of them because they never actually get any actual work done.
Yeah. Yeah. These days, I kind of set a rule for myself. I can't go to any convention that isn't going to bring me out.
Mhm.
Either the convention or a publisher at the convention has to, bring me
Yep.
out and put me up as a guest. Um, Otherwise, I just can't do it. I mean,
Mhm.
it's a lot of work, and it does take time away from how I make my living. Really,
Exactly.
conventions are great, and I love meeting folks, but yeah, it takes time away from actual writing, and that can be harmful to the checkbook.
Yes. Well, I just think I try to like relate it to people. I don't think some people realize it is like you work your 9 to 5 Monday through Friday job, and then on the weekend, this weekend, take and do what you're doing for 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, and then promote that at a convention and sign autographs and talk to people and take photos of people all weekend, and then go back to work on Monday and do it all over again. And most people would say to screw off. But for some reason we expect every creator to be at every convention, and it's like they just can't do all of them. Not saying you're not going to do all of them, but I'm saying like
So
you have to pick and choose when
I
you're
am
writing.
in awe of the people who can do one every weekend,
Yeah.
because wow, that is that's some that takes some gumption and some
Yeah.
stick to itiveness.
And some people have to, and I understand that. But like, yeah, I know. I almost feel more for the vendors. Like, there's people that I've talked to at different conventions where like you look at a vendor and they set up like they sell like I don't know movie posters or whatever at all the different conventions, and they literally pack up and they get in the car and they drive to
To
convention
another
too, and then
convention. Yeah.
they're just convention go hoppers, and I'm like, can you imagine setting that entire setup over and over and over again every single weekend?
Yeah, I was leaving Planet Comic Con, which is the
Yeah.
Kansas City show I do, and I was leaving that show, and I saw one of the vendors. I mean, and he had a drill, and he was taking his stand apart, and it's like, oh gosh, that seems like the worst. That is so hard to
I want you
do
to,
week in and
Cullen, I
week
just want
out.
you to show up at your next convention literally and say, all I need is a table, no tablecloth, no backdrop, no nothing. And you just put like 4 or 5 stacks of comic books on there that you brought in your flight and be like, here we
I,
go. I'm ready to sell.
I can't do that. I do like to bring a lot of stuff to conventions, but yeah, sometimes it would be nice just to sit at a table without a cloth and just, what do you
Like,
want?
have you seen the episode of The Office where they bring that single sheet of white
Oh
paper
yeah,
to that? They
yeah,
just do that. There you
because
go.
that's
Just one.
all potentials right here on this one sheet of paper.
This
You
is the
know,
Cullen Bunn table.
I think you're onto something. That might be how I'm going to do conventions. The guy I mentioned earlier who's managing all my store and my stocks gonna hate that concept, but that's what I'm gonna
Just
do.
do that.
Just
And then one person's going to come up there and sign up for your your email list. You're like, no, you
yeah.
ruined my potential. But yeah, so I really appreciate Colin you coming on, talking about all your books, things that are going on in the comic book world for you. We're big supporters of you, so keep it up, keep it
Thank you.
going. I want more. I want more Nightwalkers, and like I said, I'm excited to finish Legacy of Violence and looking forward to Ghostlore and Lamentation coming out soon. So check your local comic book shop, people. Get those orders in because it's nice to have a pre-order in so that comic book shops aren't stuck with either none of them or too many of them or whatever it may be. So get
Yeah,
those into your
for
LCS.
sure.
And then
Well,
visit cullenbun.com for everything. So
thanks for having me. A lot of fun. I appreciate all the support.
Thanks a lot. Enjoy the rest of your day and keep hard working. Don't take any time off.
I won't. I can't. Can't do it.